Hello, everybody. This is Gynarchy Awakening. I haven't made one of these in about 11 days. Just got out of the bath. I feel refreshed. It's going to be a bit of a controversial topic. I've been meaning to do it, so I'm just going to get right into this. Does Misandry have a value in the Gynarchy community? Now, if you don't know what misandry is, misandry is like extreme prejudice, dislike, or hatred of men. I would like to say that before I answer the question, I would like to posit, or actually, I'd like to propose the notion that you can have logical reasons for disliking a group of people, and you can also have emotional reasons for disliking people. The reason why I'm saying this is because usually when somebody refers to you as a hater or a hateful person, it's a cheap attempt to dismiss the person's thoughts and opinions about pretty much anything. Also, the one of the I guess I don't know if you call it a presupposition here, but it seems to me as if whenever somebody is saying this, they're suggesting that, oh, there's no logical reason to ever hate anybody or anything, which we know is nonsense. Um, if you were to ask people, especially Jewish people who are Holocaust survivors, if they hated Hitler, I don't think anyone would be too judgmental of them for saying, yeah. In fact, they'd be supportive of it because of all the horrible things that man and his followers have done, and the people who continue to do things in their name and in the name of those ideologies. So hatred is an emotion, but it's not inherently a bad thing. And I think part of the problem with the discussions surrounding hatred, a lot of it has to do with Western thought processes and the incessant need to suppress emotion. It doesn't work. People are going to feel how they're going to feel. You can't suppress hatred. You can only channel it and help somebody process it. And that's why I've often found Eastern philosophies and religions to be not only more instructive in guiding someone through the human condition, but more realistic. You have a violent side. I mean, George Lucas calls it. I think it was like dark side and light side. There's other names for it. There's Ashla and Bogan. I generally think of them as the violent side and the destructive side, and these are both inside of you. They're inside every human being, and I've talked about why that was before. It has almost everything to do with our survival as a species, especially going back thousands of years. We couldn't avoid destroying things in order to survive. And so that naturally gave birth to a destructive side. Uh, but we also have a creative side. And the reason why I use destruction and creation as opposed to good and bad is because we invented and fabricated moral laws in order to protect certain economic interests, in order to protect some religious interests, in order to build certain kinds of communities that would consolidate power within those groups, um, as well as other reasons. Some of them are just more practical. You don't want people, like, you can't build an army if people within your own community are killing each other. You can't defend yourself from another nation if you don't have unity within your own. The old saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand, yada, yada, yada. So I think of it more in those terms of creation and destruction, because creation and destruction do not necessarily automatically align with good and evil. It depends on the context. Unless you know the context for an act of destruction or creation, you can't really determine whether that was a good thing or a bad thing for an individual or society. Now, if you can process it correctly, if you can channel it Can you take hate and anger and can you channel it in a positive way? I think that's possible. But I also think that there is the danger of taking the hatred and anger too far. And I think that this is where Western philosophy kind of interjects and says, well, we need to put the stop on it now because if we don't suppress it sooner or later, if you like they like Western thought processes tend to believe that if you keep feeding an idea, it grows until like the forest is on fire. Um, I don't believe that. For many people, I think that simply processing these emotions and trying to understand why they have them and working their way through them is a lot. It's a more effective strategy for dealing with hate, as opposed to, oh, just don't feel that way or just don't think those thoughts, as if it's like a switch you can turn on or off. I've never known anybody to have that emotional capacity to turn off how they feel. I don't know of anybody who's like this. Maybe there's some random humans out there who can do it. I'm not one of them, and I certainly haven't observed many cases where people within my personal life were just able to stop feeling the way they felt. It's absurd. So that brings me up to the topic of misandry. I think that as long as you channel it positively and you use it to help and support women and girls, I mean, by ways of service and ways of improving their quality of life, trying to um, preserve and protect their rights and so on. I think that those are perfectly acceptable ways of doing it, again, within peaceful means. But when you start to get into like the violent territory, where you're thinking about like killing people or committing like acts of terrorism or destruction, you have to stop right there. There is a balancing act that is involved in hatred, and having hatred for other people. And I've lived that balance my entire life. In fact, I decided I wanted to go over like some of my own misandric feelings. Now, I know some people are probably going to use this video to dismiss my other thoughts and beliefs, but I'm not going to lie about the experiences that I had that played into the man that I became today and the person I am today and why I think and the way I do, why I feel the way that I do. Our personal experiences do matter, no matter who you are. But also, it was the frequency of these experiences that really pushed me in a misandric direction. So I don't deny that I have those emotions. I don't deny that I have anger and hatred towards some other men. And by the time this video is finished, I think you'll understand why. But for what it's worth, for how I feel about it, I don't feel like a person's misandry in any way invalidates their perspectives, their experiences, or their logical reasons for believing it. You can have emotional reasons for something and logical reasons. Mine in these cases just happened to be a bit more experiential and more emotional because I was either directly involved in it or I was related to it somehow. So to give you an idea of how this worked, a lot of my negative feelings towards men began when I was a young boy. Now, obviously, I wasn't perfect. I had my problems, but I was exposed to some of the negative behavior of young boys, the way that they acted, the way they were talking, and that set a pretty bad tone, pretty much for the rest of my life. And the more I learned about what was going on with these people in my family, these guys, the less I was inclined to want to spend too much time with them. And that trend has only increased with age. So, the first major, one of the first two major incidents, and I won't go into full detail on one of them because it's unfortunately too painful. But the other one, actually, all of it's painful, but one of them I'm just going to have to leave out certain details because I don't want to like talk about it for long. But it is partially why it became this way. So there was, I remember my mother pulled me aside once, and she told me about an incident that happened where she was molested by a family member. Now, it's one thing to have a boyfriend or somebody like, you're dating do this. Um, it's one thing for that to happen. And I'm not saying that that is somehow in any way automatically less bad, but there is something that you can do when some asshole takes it too far. You can kick them out of your home, or you can get your parents to kick them out of your home if you've got supportive parents. So at least that way, you can reestablish a place of safety within that household. But in my mother's case, she didn't have that option. Not only was she mistreated by boys, but the primary individual who molested her was her older brother. I believe he was like 16 or 17 at the time, and she was only about like 10 or 11. So she was younger, she was physically weaker, she had no chance of fighting off this attacker, this child molester. And what he did was he molested her in the bathroom of her own home. He never faced any consequences for this. The statute of limitations is up. It should never be up for child molestation or rape, but unfortunately it is. Uh, there was no justice at all for this act, for this terrible, terrible act that uh, that scarred this woman for the rest of her life. And what made this incident so disturbing is that this was a member of her own family. This was somebody who was related to her by blood. And there was no escape for her. She couldn't just go and live with somebody else. So there was no safety in her home. And what made it worse is what I learned when I read an incomplete work of hers. She was trying to finish something documenting her experiences with men that happened not only inside the home and also her marriage, but outside of the home. So you take it outside of the home. And she documented an incident where a bunch of young boys sexually assaulted her on a playground. So she is not feeling safe in the home. She is not feeling safe outside of her home. There's no sanctuary for my mother. There's no place where she can go where she feels safe from these twisted fucking boys and young men. And no one is defending her. No one is protecting her. This made quite the impression on me as a young man. And it also filled me with a lot of anger and rage, because your home should always be a place where you can go to where you're like, that's it. Don't have to worry about anything. Whoever is here, mom's here, dad's here, brothers are here, sisters are here, safe. But no, that didn't happen. So from a very young age, I learned that for some human beings, especially for women, there is no safety. There is no sanctuary. There is no peace of mind. Their nervous systems are in a state of constant hypervigilance. They cannot relax. They will not be allowed to relax because they're always on the defensive psychologically. Now, as a young man, I didn't understand these things. I was just internalizing the information I was being given by a family member. Oh, but it gets so much better, because it's not just him doing it. It's not just the other stories about the male family members. It's when they actually go off the rails and do crazy shit. I had at the time, around that time, there was a family member of mine. I had a cousin, a father of a cousin. What this guy did was he threw a temper tantrum. I don't know all the details, but he threw a temper tantrum. Started like I don't remember 100% what I saw, but I know he was throwing objects around in the front yard. He was he looked extremely dangerous. And my mother at the time was with my aunt, and she was holding a firearm. Yes, really. My mother had a firearm. She was going to kill this guy if he got close to her sister. And because he knew that, he was taking his anger out in other ways. He wanted to take it out on his wife, obviously. And my aunt had already suffered physical assault from one of her previous partners. From what I heard, she was beaten by that guy. So my mother is holding a gun, ready to shoot this guy, ready to kill him. This is the level of severity it got to. And eventually, when he blew off enough steam, he left the home and he actually came for me and my sister, believe it or not. And my sister instructed me to kind of like lay low and keep quiet. And I think we were in the hallway and we heard something. And that was this guy coming over to our place. Now, I don't know exactly what he had in mind or what he was going to do, but you know, we all think that was him coming over to our home after my mother was protecting her sister. And I think he was trying to take it out on, he was still had a lot of anger left over, and he was trying to take it out on somebody. And if he couldn't get his wife, who I think they're in the process of divorcing, if he couldn't get my mother, he was going to get somebody related to them. You know, this is the level of pettiness that we're talking about here. And then, so, you know, I felt threatened. I felt like this, I don't know what this guy's going to do. After that incident, not obviously, he abandoned his children. He had 2 children at the time. He abandoned them to go live in Alaska. And then a few years later, we found out that this guy slept with girls under the age of 18. So these are the types of men who were in my family. This was my exposure to what men are. And it's not just like one example, it's like several examples of unbelievable awfulness. It is very rare when I have them, and even with the good men, I'm always questioning them. I'm always like, are you doing some shit behind the scenes? Are you just one of these smarter motherfuckers that knows how to get away with shit? You know, are you busy raping and beating like your wives or whatever while I'm not looking? I've never been able to trust men. Never. Because of shit like that. The things that women have done to me in my life are in no way comparable to what the men done. And I'm talking about my family first, because then I have to get into the boys I ran into. Now, I'm not saying I'm a fucking saint, but I sure as hell don't rape people. I don't kill people. I don't break the law. I don't do this other shit. I'm not involved in any of that crap. Wish I could say the same for a lot of these young boys who are causing problems for me growing up. So then I have a different situation, which I'm not going to go into detail about it, but let's put it this way. There was a situation where a family member, you see what I'm talking about, molested my sister, played strip poker with her. She was just a little kid. Now, again, it's another man doing this. You'll notice that pattern here. And there's another pattern too. These men have a tendency to prey on victims that are too weak to defend themselves. It is always almost universally like that. I have rarely ever seen an incident where a predator went after somebody on equal standing with them. I don't know of such an incident. I'm sure they're out there, but they probably do date drugs, whatever. Predators don't like it if their victims can challenge them. And so what they do is they try to find somebody who is physically weaker, who is not as intelligent, or who is not as wise to their tactics and strategies, and they fuck with them. Now, these are the men in my life. These are the individuals who set the tone, who set everything into motion. If it wasn't for these men, I might be a completely different person today, but these are the individuals who influenced some of, and not all, some of my misandric feelings towards men. Because they committed such atrocious acts that it is difficult to fathom. And I have my blood, their blood is in my veins. And I have to sit back and wonder, how can I, as a man who's never even seriously thought about doing this, who's never even given it a second thought, who's just trying to take care of his business, trying to live his life, how in the world could I be related to these fucking scumbags? How could I be related to these monsters? And yet, I am. It's part of the reason why I don't even want to reproduce. Because it's like, if they did it, what happens if I give birth to a son who does it? Just because they're being nice around me doesn't mean they're being nice. They're just doing an act. I mean, I've seen this play out before. Some movies did a really good job explaining it, but I've seen it real life. This might have to go to a part 2. In fact, I will do a part 2 on this. Yeah, so I'll see you in part 2. It's getting to 20 minutes.